For my project, I decided I wanted to focus on acronyms, and abbreviations primarily. The purpose of this video is to discuss how we use acronyms and determine what we want to abbreviate. My thesis is based on the history of shorthand and focuses on how we abbreviate things based on relevant feelings and slang use at the time. And the reason I want to focus on this is because abbreviations are used everywhere. And I want to primarily focus on popularized usage and slang usage for this project. Within slang, most commonly, the abbreviations that we see are linked to emotions, expressions, and actions that often convey a feeling. So some examples that I've given is LOL, ROFL, OMG, which are all initialisms, which focus on actions or expressions. So OMG is an expression that we often use. LOL is both an emotion and an action. Similarly, ROFL, same thing. It's both an emotion and an action. And then I also wanted to focus on abbreviations, such as Frizz and Delulu. Frizz is a popularized way of saying charisma, and Delulu is a new one that has recently surfaced that means delusional. So to start off, I wanted to focus on shorthand in English. Shorthand in English is something that we have been doing for a very long time, specifically in writing. And the reason we do it is because it's easier and faster to write, and it gets the point across without having to use as much ink. It gets the point across without having to say as much. And through the century, shorthand has been written in systems based on orthography, which is normal spelling, on phonetics, the sound of words, and on arbitrary symbols such as the small circle within a large circle to represent the phrase around the world. So we've been doing this for a very long time, and some of the examples that I provided are the phonetic alphabet, which, as we've covered in class, focuses on how words sound in shortening words that way. There's light line phonography, which is a linear form of writing where essentially people will write out a line, and based on how it's curved or how short or long it is, it'll convey words or letters much faster. There's also speed writing, which is akin to cursive. And that focuses on just trying to write things out without using as many letters as well. So I want to get into abbreviations since that is kind of the overarching focus of acronyms and initialisms, which I will primarily be focusing on. And abbreviation is a shortened form of a word or phrase used to make writing easier, reading faster, and the text shorter by reducing the need to repeat the longer word or phrase. So there are three main types of abbreviations: shortening, contractions, and initialisms. Shortenings usually consist of the first few letters of a word, such as poliomythus becoming polio. Contractions are words which contain certain letters that have been omitted, such as doctor becoming DR. And initialisms are formed from the first letter of words expressed as a longer name or phrase that are usually pronounced as letters, such as OBGYN. And we see a lot of initialisms within text. And the most popularized version of an initialism is the phrase okay, which I found interesting. And like I have mentioned earlier, there are other phrases such as LOL, OMG, other expressions that we commonly use. Initialisms are the condensation of a word or phrase into a pronounceable initialism. Seems to be a fairly recent invention, identified as being American. So this is something new that we have recently come up with, and it's not something that's been around for as long of a time. And young people use slang, express their feelings with emoticons or abbreviations such as LOL, shortens the words, or reinvents new one. So new slang and initialisms are constantly resurfacing, and that kind of drives me to my next point, which is in grouping. Since the main form of abbreviations and acronyms that I'm looking at are exactly that. I wanted to discuss something that we're seeing with abbreviations used today, and that have existed for a long time. And it's an issue with the usage, which is because their meanings are sometimes not apparent, abbreviations can also become codes that separate in-groups who know them from out-groups who do not. So initially this was used by the military, where they wanted their soldiers to know what was going on, but they didn't want opposing militaries to know what was going on. Nowadays, we see it more with social media. I know we've talked about this in class a bit, but one of the things that comes to mind is TikTok. And we often will use certain phrases and words that some of the older generations who's not using that social platform may not know. And similarly, there are likely acronyms that I don't know about that some of the older generations know about. And it can cause communication issues at times. And that can cause a bit of a divide between generations and between different groups of people who may not have access to use these different platforms. We have been shortening words and phrases for a very long time, usually because of the medium of communication at the time and post space or time or economic limits on the writing process. So one of the issues is looking at consideration versus time. There's to try and avoid this, there are a lot of rules that go into abbreviations and acronyms and with shorthand in English. The decision to use abbreviations is easy in documents that use no more than, say, 5 common ones that represent long terms that are often used. In reality, the skillful use of abbreviations requires judgment, which should be informed by a knowledge of their strengths and weaknesses. So the choice to use acronyms and abbreviations and initialisms is something that often has to be used with care. And that's why there are rules. And Bob Grange has a bullet point list where he discusses some of the rules that go into forming acronyms or abbreviations and such. And these rules are as followed. An acronym is at least 3 letters. So that's why you never see only 2-word acronyms. The word must be easily pronounceable. So if it's words like charisma or words like Riz and stuff like that, it has to be something that can be easily pronounced, which means there's usually a vowel of some sort. It must simplify communication. So let's go to words like OMG. That's something that can be an exclamation that simplifies that communication and can get the point across much faster. Or if we go back to the OBGYN example, it simplifies a way of knowing what doctor you're going to. It should have utility beyond a single paper or report. So again, with the doctor example, that can be used anywhere. If you're saying, oh, I have to go to the doctor's, you could, if you're typing out something, you could also say, oh, I'm going to DR, I'm going to this specific doctor, or within professors, if you say, oh, I'm going to prof whatever, there's different uses that can be used with that. And the list goes on and on to avoid in-grouping. And here are my citations. Thank you.